Word Balloon is brought to you by AlexRossArt.com. Alex has been a longtime sponsor of Word Balloon. I greatly appreciate it. You got to go to his website. You will find tremendous art from original work, covers, pages, fantastic lithographs, amazing posters. Every price point is covered, and every subject is covered at AlexRossArt.com. You've enjoyed his iconic looks at DC and Marvel, but also great stuff like his wonderful work on the Monkees, Monty Python, so many other great pop culture things that Alex has put his fingerprints on. His wonderful Flash Gordon poster that evokes the fantastic Dino De Laurentiis Sam Jones movie. Recently, Alex did things like the timeless Marvel covers featuring great solo shots of all your favorite Marvel heroes, and of course his Fantastic Four full circle graphic novel still available. All waiting for you now at AlexRossArt.com. Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. I was so sorry to hear over the weekend that Diana Schutz was in the hospital and not feeling well. There's a new report that she's okay. It was nothing major, but we're all breathing a sigh of relief. And she's another one of these great people in comics, and what a body of work that she has accomplished going back to the late 70s when she started off working at a comic book store, hooking up with companies like Comico and Dark Horse, and spending a long time at Dark Horse. Within about the last 10 years or so, she retired from Dark Horse. She is an adjunct professor at Portland State University, a wonderful ambassador of comics, continues to translate foreign comics into English, which only broadens our comic book horizons when we get to read some of these wonderful works from around the world. And she's great. I've had 2 conversations with her over the years, and this is the one from 2013 that I'm representing today. It's great. Of course, she's had an incredible amount of work editing people like Stan Sakai and Frank Miller and Will Eisner. Will Eisner month is coming up in March, as Danny Fingeroff just told us a week or so ago. So I figured out, something, she's on my mind. I love doing, representing these conversations that are evergreen, if you will. And I think this one with Diana Schutz certainly suits that purpose as well. She's Matt Wagner's sister-in-law. How's that for comic book family? Isn't that great? It's always good to catch up with Diana Schutz. I need to do a new conversation with her. I saw her at Rose City in 2018, the summer of 2018, and she was tabling next to Gabriel Bond, Fabio Moon, and it was a great opportunity to talk to all 3 of them. And always warm, always sweet. And, I just wish her well. So, while I'm thinking about Diana Schutz, let's all think about her as we enjoy this great conversation on today's Word Balloon. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon. This is John Suntress with an important plea for 2023. You probably read the headlines. Word Balloon took a sponsorship hit that was pretty significant. And I'm asking you if you've ever been a fan of Word Balloon and considered making a donation through Patreon, a very meager but important subscription. I hope you'll consider it. It's going to be a challenging 2023, and I need your help. So if you like Word Balloon, if you enjoy the content, I'm not going to slow down and keep bringing you some excellent content, but I could really use your help via Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. If you can afford the price of a comic book, if you can even afford $1 a month, it would be greatly appreciated and help the cause to keep Word Balloon going at the level and intensity that I've been doing in the last 4 or 5 years, and bring you a lot more content and a lot of great interviews and interesting things about the pop culture world. Patreon.com/wordballoon. I could really use your help. Thank you for your attention, your time, and listening to Word Balloon.
Man, I can't believe, and shame on me, that it's been 7 years since I've sat down with Diana Schutz. I've seen her a few times in San Diego over the years and briefly said hello, and she's always been really kind to me. It's great to talk to her about all the subjects that we do. And it really was this wonderful, relaxed conversation we had last Friday. Canada had just beaten the U.S. for the Olympic gold, and Diana's a Canadian. We didn't even talk about the Olympics or gold, but we did talk about moving from Vancouver to the States and stuff. And it really was like kind of just one of those times when we already break into conversation before we're officially on the record, and she already started like pouring out good information. So as you'll hear, I'll be like, oh, can we keep all that? Can we start now? And we do. So without further ado, my conversation with Diana Schutz now on Word Balloon. All right. Well, yeah, I just want to, I want to talk about what you're doing now and kind of geek culture stuff. I just want, if it's okay, I'd like your opinion on the, emerging fangirl movement of late.
I don't know anything about it.
Oh, okay. Right.
I find as I'm getting older, I'm getting sort of, it's really funny because back when I first started working in comics, which was like 1978.
Okay.
We were all hoping for comics to move out into the larger culture, and that was the focus. I mean, I started in retail, and the store that I was working in, and then the subsequent store that I went to work in California, the motivation was all about attracting sort of the civilian consumer, bringing the civilian into comics, so that comics would not just cater to the nerds like me and you back then, and would cater to a larger audience. So, be careful what you wish for, because we got it now. It's here. And and now that it is here, it's not my little secret club anymore. And it's I don't know. It's a bizarre. Going to San Diego every year now is just the weirdest thing. Those 100,000 people, who are all dressed up and. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, the point of this harangue is that as I get older, and now having worked in comics over 35 years, I find that I'm sort of removing myself from this larger movement, I guess. I don't feel quite a part of it in the way that I used to.
That's
which is not to say that I don't still love comics. I still read them. I'm still in the store every Wednesday, but yeah, I'm not very involved. Christ, I'm almost 60 years old. I'm not very involved with geek culture.
No, I understand. We're only about 10 years apart, so don't sweat it. And I understand where you're coming from, and I know that people my age and your age as well. I mean, yeah, we're all just like interested in this development where, as you say, we've been waiting for this to happen. Can this be on the record? Because I thought that was very eloquent.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. Well, then, all right, and I haven't had a chance to introduce you yet, other than, I'm sure, something pre-recorded. So let me officially say, Diana Schutz, welcome back to Word Balloon. It's wonderful to have you back.
And Thank you so much.
Absolutely, and I'm so sorry that it's taken so long to get you back. But this is good. We have a chance to kind of look at the last couple of years, and I do appreciate where you're coming from with that opening point. I guess, well, what are you, I'm curious now, you said it, you're in the shop every Wednesday, you're working still at Dark Horse, so what interests you to buy or look for every Wednesday? What are you looking for these days?
Well, I need to amend that too. I am working at Dark Horse, but I'm actually working from home. So I've given up my office at Dark Horse, and I get to sit at home, in my slippers with the two cats and work in peace and quiet for the most part. It's great.
Nice going, absolutely.
That said, I do go into the office about once a week for meetings, to drop work off, to pick up more, and to, confer with my assistant and my designer and my boss, but yeah. So I'm there, but I'm not there, and it's been very productive for me. But I think it also serves to remove me a little bit from all that stuff too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But what books? And then that's all interesting. Honestly, no, that was all great. But yeah, what are you reading these days?
what am I reading?
Or looking for?
Right, well, I'm not looking for anything because I'm very busily trying to wrap up a bunch of projects that have been backburnered for years. So yeah, I'm not actively out there looking for stuff. What I'm reading right now, I'm about halfway through the 14, or maybe 2/3 of the way through the 14 elements that make up Chris Ware's Building Stories.
Outstanding.
And which is a real mind. Well, can I say that?
Absolutely. You can say anything. Absolutely. Mind.
All right. Well, it's a real mindfuck is what it is. And it's great, I mean, there are all these different elements of this box that are all different ways of getting at a story, a person's story, or a cluster of stories that are all centered around this one building. And you get sort of, it's almost like a puzzle. You get all these bits and pieces, and you have to sort of put it all together, which is really a metaphor for what we do with comics generally. We take those bits and pieces, those panels, and we put them together to make the story. So yeah, Chris Ware. I'm looking at the pile that's by the bed right now. There's a reprint of George Carlson work, classic comics from the 40s. By George Carlson, a great cartoonist. The Peanuts run that Fantagraphics is publishing. I'm avidly reading everything that Dean Mullaney is, all the newspaper strip reprints.
Me too.
I can't, like Little Orphan Annie. She started with Terry and the Pirates.
Yep.
There's the Dick Tracy stuff. And I'm reading a ton of European comics, too.
I'm thrilled about that. Yeah, and I know you're translating European comics as well.
I am, yeah, which is partly why I'm working from home, because that's just not the kind of, that sort of work really, it's just impossible to do in an office environment. You really need, it's like writing. You really need to be in a quiet space, or I really need to be in a quiet space to do it. So.
Which creators are you translating right now?
Well, I'm wrapping up the last of 9 volumes of Milo Manara's work.
I've been reading that stuff. That's fantastic. That's the thing, Diana. I think half the stuff I read, I forget, like Usagi and all that stuff. You forget who's editing and stuff. So please, the Manara collections have been just fantastic. Really cool. The best editors are, we're invisible. If we're good, we're invisible. Here.
So you're supposed to, you're not supposed to realize that the editorial hand is there. The Manara stuff has been a terrific learning experience. I started out working on that with Kim Thompson. Kim, I had approached Kim about finding someone to translate from Italian. I have French, and I can read Spanish and speak a little bit, but I can read and understand. But Italian, I had no experience with Italian, except, of course, it's very similar to French and Spanish. But I contacted Kim about finding someone to do the translations, and Kim basically volunteered himself. So we were working pretty closely together, and then I actually signed up for an Italian course, 1 term, just to learn how the verbs work and the pronouns and the plurals and that kind of stuff, so that coupled with the French and the Spanish, I then was able to read and understand, and of course working on 2,500 pages of Italian comics means that I'm now able to do the translations myself. So, I've had to pick up a little bit where he left off. Sadly, when we lost him last summer.
Yeah.
But I'm also working with a couple other translators to help me out because there's just this last volume is about 300 pages, and
wow.
And it's a lot.
Will we see that last volume before the end of the year?
In September.
Fantastic, wonderful. And have you had?
That's good.
I'm sure it's a relief. Absolutely, no, I could appreciate that.
Well, yeah, but also assuming I can make the deadline.
Understood. No,
we're loaded up these days at Dark Horse. I got to tell you, man, there's lots of work. In another week or so, there's one book going out to the printer that's suitable for home defense. It's a 1,360 page Sin City omnibus that we're calling Big Damn Sin City. And it's huge. It's gigantic. What is up with this desire for big, gigantic books that how can you read those things? How do people read those things? I don't get it,
Well, it's two things. It's so funny. My friend Jason Wood, who's another podcaster, has coined the phrase shelf porn, which I kind of get. Because it really is cool having those kind of big, giant volumes. I can appreciate that. By the same token, it's tough on your lap. I don't know how people do it. Not only comics, the comics, as you say, they're huge. I just lent somebody a Spencer Tracy, the biography that came out of him a couple of years ago, and it's 900 pages. And yeah, my friend complains too. It's like, well, I'd love to read it, but it's just so cumbersome, and it's really tough to find a space and sit down and have this thing cut off your circulation while you're reading it for an hour or 20 minutes or whatever. So no, I can appreciate that.
But even like a 900-page book is what? Maybe it's a 6x9 or a 7x10. These gigantic things that are being published, like Big Damn Sin City, is 8x12.
Wow.
And with 1,300 pages, it's huge and it's heavy. And then you look at some of those great books that Peter Maresca is doing, those big, giant, published at size of the original tabloid newspaper strips. The Gasoline Alley Sundays, for instance, or the
IDW
Crazy
stuff,
Cat, Color Sundays.
Yes.
And they're huge. You have to read them sort of spread out on the floor, and I guess maybe that's part of the point. It's like, oh, well, you're supposed to be like a kid reading the Sunday Funnies on the floor.
Yep.
But I'm not a kid.
And you're tiny. You're tiny. What are you talking about?
Crunch down on the floor like that. Anyway.
No, if that falls off the shelf, you've got an issue there. You got an insurance issue, I think. That's not good.
Yeah.
No, but that's really cool, though. So what other things beyond the stories are going into the giant omnibus for Sin City?
Actually, that's, when you put all 7 Sin City volumes in there, plus a few covers here and there, you have filled up.
Okay.
You have filled up that many pages. Yeah. I don't think we could have put much more in there, to tell you the truth. I don't think the book would have worked. There are printing issues for stuff like this, too. Our printer requires a whole extra month over and above what they usually need to put together a book like this, so it's been pedal to the metal on our part to get it done.
Wow.
But,
very cool. Well, and they want it obviously in time for the next movie, I guess.
Yes, the movie is due out the end of August, I think August 22nd, if I'm not mistaken, and so we've, in addition to having all 7 Sin City trade paperbacks in print in big numbers, we've got three 3 Sin City projects going, and one is Big Dam, like I just said, and then we're putting out a mass market hardcover of Dame to Kill For. Cool. Again, sort of for the civilian crowd who maybe don't want to immediately jump into either a big giant volume, big $100 heavy 1,000+ page book, or don't want to jump into 7 trade paperbacks, but are just kind of curious, and so here's a hardcover, the book that inspired the movie kind of thing for them. And then we're putting the Art of Sin City back into print as a soft cover.
Cool.
It's been out of print for a little while, and we planned to do a soft cover version a while ago, and I think it was really just waiting on my schedule to free up a bit. And then with the movie sort of in the offing, my schedule was forced to free.
Sure. God, I remember 10 years ago, and I can't believe it's been 10 years, but when the first movie came out, and all the greats, that is when the Art of Sin City book came out as well, am I correct?
I think it came out a few years before that.
Oh, did it? Okay.
But at that time, we published a library edition version of the Art of Sin City. That was sort of volume 8 of a slipcase 8-volume. Again, big books. Big books, just a nice way to have them.
Sure.
But yeah, at that time, I think we did that was the first, when the first movie came out, was the first time that we did the 6x9 editions of Sin City that Chip Kidd designed first time out.
Yeah, those were gorgeous. Yeah, no, I enjoyed those. I had a couple of the other volumes before that, but when all 7 came out like that was kind of perfect for my shelf and everything.
Yeah, and it's nice. He did that thing on the spine where when you've got all 7 volumes together, you've got this illustration that connects on the spine. It looks nice on a bookshelf.
Very cool. Does Frank get involved with these reissues and stuff? Does he, do you talk to him and,
Well, yeah, I do. I mean, he certainly sees everything. He owns it, so he has to approve all the design work and everything that we have going. Yeah, so yeah, absolutely.
How's he doing?
His thing, his copyright. So
understood. So. Yeah. How's he been? I mean, we haven't heard from him, I think, since Holy Terror or whatever came out a couple of years ago.
Well, he's been busy, I mean, making a movie takes a long time.
Sure.
So I don't really, I don't know a lot about movies, and I don't know a lot about the making of movies. I spent 2 days on the set of the Spirit movie back in whenever it was, 2007 or 2008, and it was really boring. I mean, I had a blast, but making a movie is really slow and long days, and take after take, and anyway, I don't know. My hat's off to those people. I don't know how they can do it, and you think about all the people. When you watch a movie and you look at the lists and lists of people who worked on the movie, the coordination involved in making a feature film is just so unbelievable that frankly, it's a miracle that any movie gets made.
Understood.
And I mean, a real bonus if it's even good. But there are so many opportunities for things to go wrong. Anyway, it's just such a massive undertaking these days.
I'm with you. I've heard William Friedkin say that, like, a great movie needs 1,000 things to go right. And it is so random, as you say, because so many people are involved.
At least 1,000 things, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
So Frank has been very busy with Sin City, too. I mean, he was on the set for months and months, and now they're in post-production, and then, and plus the publicity is starting.
Sure.
And so Yeah, his hands are really full.
Well, fingers crossed.
Thank God. I mean, I've worked with him long enough, and I've known him for over 30 years now. So he really trusts me, and I'm really grateful for that, because sometimes it's just like, you know, you're really busy, and I gotta go. I gotta get this done, and he's like, just go ahead. I trust you. Thank God. You know.
Awesome.
So.
No, that's cool. Well, you know, and that's the thing. You've had these great long runs with Frank and with Stan Sakai, and you know, I mean, it's really amazing. These, you know, Jeff Smith too, right?
Well, I've known Jeff for about 20 years now, but we only ever really worked together once on The Art of Bone.
Okay.
No, Jeff self-publishes all his own.
Right. That's true.
So,
that's true.
So he recently, you know, we're all working on this Stan Sakai benefit.
I was going to ask about that, please. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's all over Facebook. Everyone is posting their stuff, and my God, some of what's coming in is just incredible. Anyway, and Jeff was one of the first people to deliver some art for the book, and he did just a gorgeous piece. But that's the first time that I worked with Jeff in a lot of years.
Okay, and you know, it's funny because I remember from our last conversation, and that was a number of years ago, that you were working on the art of Bone.
Art of Bone.
Yeah. That, and also Harlan Ellison's Dream Corridor Volume 2, which, by the way, and it was so funny. Someone heard our podcast, and at the time, Harlan only had his message board. And it's like, hey, Harlan, I heard Diana Schutz on Word Balloon, and she says the Dream Corridor is coming out. And it was just typical Harlan. What? I don't know anything. What are you talking? What is a podcast? How do I get this? Can someone write down what they said? It was awesome. And it was just thrilling
God
to
bless him. Did you see his tirade about saving Mr. Banks?
No.
Just Saving Mr. Banks, Mary Poppins movie.
No, I haven't seen it. No, please.
T.L. Travers. Oh, it's just a wonderful tirade where he's facing the camera and raging about the fact that this movie has nothing to do with real life. And it's like, wait, Harlan, were you trying to tell me movies aren't real? Okay. I think I know that.
Well, you know, we know that, but I got to tell you, coming from sports radio, and not only listener, but also hosts that really do think a lot of sport movies were almost documentaries. And it's like, come on, man.
What?
I'm telling you, I'm not proud of that. And I'm glad I'm not in that world anymore, but I'm just telling you what I saw 10 years of sports radio. And I'd be like, guys, it's not a documentary.
Well,
there's artistic.
No, I mean, look, you're right. It's true. People are gullible.
Yeah.
You know? And movies give us such a nice, tidy view of the world.
Yep. It's right there for you.
It's nice to believe in, but
well, let's talk about the Stan Project.
It's the magic of the movies, right? The illusion of the movies. Got to remember that.
This is true, absolutely. But I'm glad you brought up the Stan Project because I wanted to talk about that. You know, as you say, I've seen my friends that are contributing pieces, Gabe Hardman and Mike Norton, and I've seen their pieces, and they're lovely, and I'm sure Jeff's is as well. And as you say, I think if people really do want to hunt around, is there a Facebook place that everyone is putting their stuff, or are they just doing it on their own things? And obviously,
no, everyone's just doing it on their own. I don't think it would be great if there were a spot for all that stuff, but I think that could potentially damage sales on the book.
Of course.
And the whole point of the book, of course, is to benefit Stan.
Indeed.
So that's probably why there is no such thing.
Can you tell people who and bring everybody up to speed? Because I know Stan's had a lot of tough luck in the last year or so. And if you can, he
has. Yeah, he has. I mean, his wife Sharon is fighting, struggling, battling a brain tumor. It's a benign tumor, but it's in the brain. It's inoperable. And so, she's currently, she needs care, 24 hours a day care. She's living at home, and she had some pretty tough times last summer where she had to be rushed to emergency. She was in ICU. They didn't think she would make it. And anyway, she did. She's a fighter, She's been struggling really hard. And anyway, now she's back home after months of being in hospital and then in a rehab facility. Now she's back home, but she needs constant care. And then as if that weren't enough, over Christmas, Stan's grandson Leo took a nap and never woke up.
Yeah.
And little Leo was all of, I think, 16 months, so it's just sort of been a series of tragedies, one after another, and medical expenses have been intense, and Stan hasn't been able to work with the kind of, hasn't been able to work on the kind of regular schedule that he's used to.
Sure.
So Dark Horses, we've done what we can in many ways. We stepped up production on a few things. We have a Nilsson Ground Thumper collection coming out, which had sort of, been sitting on the shelf. One of those backburnered projects that I just was not finding the time to get to, and we made it a big priority to get that out because the work was already done, so Stan wouldn't have to do a lot of new work for it, and we could just publish it and make him some money. And then it was Bill Morrison at Bongo Comics who contacted us. I believe this is how the story goes, who contacted us and proposed this benefit book in conjunction with an art auction. So the pitch sort of went out. All the Dark Horse editorial staff, all the Bongo editorial staff began contacting a long list of creators, of artists, and requesting not just artwork for reproduction in a benefit book, but requesting the original physical artwork itself for sale at auction. And again, all benefits to go help defray the medical costs that Stan is facing.
Sure. No, that's wonderful. So is the auction going to be online? Is it going to be... Do you know the mechanics?
I don't know. You're going to have to interview Bill Morrison about that one.
That's a good idea. That's so funny. I was talking about Bill Morrison last night at that C2E2 function I told you about. And,
yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good excuse to do
When
that.
is that coming up?
C2E2?
Yeah, C2E2.
Late April.
Late April.
Yeah. About just about 2 months away. About this time in April, like the 20s or so. Like I want to say like the 20s.
It feels like it starts in March and it doesn't let up until about November.
Oh, hey, and again, you're in the comfort of your own home. Yeah, the con season seems to have even extended where there are shows in January and there are shows in December. So yeah, we don't even get the winter break that we used to get anymore. It's crazy.
I just did a Wizard World here in Portland, which was January, and I could not believe the attendance. Yeah.
That makes sense. And and these Wizard shows. Yeah. And I want to say, because it's been driving me nuts, I've been really wanting to get to Stumptown. But unfortunately, a lot of times it's the same weekend as C2E2.
Yeah, well, and more unfortunately, Stumptown is no longer, I'm afraid.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, me too, because that was my favorite convention of all. A real hometown, homegrown celebration of DIY culture, and where you'd find a lot of really exciting young up and coming talent. I don't really know what happened, but they recently announced that last year was the last one. Or maybe they're kind of merging with another convention called Rose City.
Yes.
Comic-Con. I'm not really sure of all the details, but Stumptown as we knew it is no longer, I'm sorry to say.
I understand, and it is because of that real down-to-earth grassroots feel of it and stuff that, every time I would read about it, I was incredibly envious. Honestly, if I could work anywhere in the country, I would be in your neighborhood because the community out there, my God, I mean, all my friends are out there. Rucka, Bendis, Fractions, really, Jeff Parker.
It's incredible. It's incredible what's happened here. I mean, when Mike Richardson first moved Bob Schreck and me here in 1990, there were very few, professional comics people here. I think Paul Galassi was living here, Ron Randall, and Chris Warner, of course, and the 10 people who made up Dark Horse Comics at that time.
Yeah, it's true. That's true.
And but all those 10 people were sort of local people. They hadn't worked in comics elsewhere, And anyway, 6 months after Bob and I were here, Matt Wagner and my sister moved here, and then, that was 24 years ago, so now I see in that time, it's just, Portland has exploded in terms of, I could literally, if I wanted to, I could go to some comics event almost every single night of the week.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I was impressed about a month or so ago. They had one of those there was a week of readings of comics, and I know creators were coming up and kind of doing like almost performance art with their books. And I'm pretty sure Matt Fraction and Kelly Sue DeConnick and I believe Rucka as well all got up and
there's a thing that an event that's hosted at a local bar called Comics Underground, and that must be it. Last year, for Will Eisner Week, the first week of March, we put on an Eisner event for Comics Underground and did something a little bit different where I corralled 6 different creators: Bendis, Matt, Kelly Sue, Mike Oming. I'm forgetting the rest. Dylan McConis. Anyway, I corralled a group of creators, and they each read a story from Last Day in Vietnam, which was Will's autobiographical graphic novel about his time sort of working for the U.S. Army. And so the thing is, they get on a stage, they read, and the art is projected in the background. Matt Fraction went a step further. He brought audience members on the stage with him to act out the images that were being projected in the background. Anyway, it was great. It was great fun.
That's excellent. No, and we talked about your work with Eisner the last time we spoke, and I'm glad you brought it up. So, is every year, do they do something for Eisner in the week of March?
Yeah, it's Will Eisner Week, and there are events all across the country. Danny Fingeroth sort of coordinates in conjunction with the Eisner Studios. Danny coordinates all these events all across the country. And this year, Bob Schreck is managing the Portland event. So Matt Wagner is going to do a reading/projection thing, like I just described, reading Invisible People.
Wow, excellent.
At Jason Levian's Floating World Comic Store, and then I'm going to give a talk about Will at the Art Institute here. So we've got 2 events going in Portland, but there are events in New York and in Boston and I would guess Chicago.
I'm stunned.
There are events in Glasgow, for God's sake. So
I'm going to be embarrassed if there isn't something happening in Chicago, and I will do what I can to find out about that. I'm going to have to look. Yeah, so does Danny have, do you know, I mean, is there a website that, Danny does that kind of lists everything?
Yeah, well, WillEisner.com
I'll go there.
has all the events, has all the Eisner events posted, the Eisner Week events.
I knew we were going to go into interesting directions in this talk, so I am thrilled. That's great. And honestly, this will be out in time for people to look for, any events in their areas if they're near major cities and stuff. And before,
yeah, that'd be good.
And before I forget, well, two things, like the Stan book, the tribute book, do you know when that's coming out?
Yes, that will be out in time for San Diego.
Okay.
Where it was a mad, I mean, we got the word a month ago, basically, that we were going to do this, and we needed to contact people, and we needed to get their art in. The deadline was yesterday, and so it really, I mean, for years, people have said that Stan Sakai is the nicest guy in comics, and he really is.
Mm-hmm.
As Juanjo Guarnido put it in an email to me recently, the artist of Black said, his life is just gone down the gutter, and he just keeps, he just sort of picks himself up and keeps smiling. And Stan has always treated everyone so, with such kindness, and he's just such a good guy. And so people have really, really responded to this. We were all working from a list that I'm not even sure who had crafted the list. Bill Morris and probably Randy Stradley at Dark Horse.
Mm-hmm.
And, because you can't remember everybody all the time, some names were not on that list, and some people contacted me. And so, for instance, Troy Nixie contacted me a week ago and said, hey, I've been seeing all these wonderful, all this wonderful artwork online, and I would like to contribute to this book. And do you think that would be okay? And, nobody's going to turn down Troy Nixie. He's an incredible artist, and I don't know why his name wasn't on the list to begin with. But I said, yes, of course, The only problem is you've got a week.
Wow.
And Troy just dropped everything, and he just, my God, he did the most beautiful samurai rabbit, realistic-looking samurai rabbit, incredibly detailed line art, just gorgeous.
Exciting.
Gorgeous.
That's
anyway.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's
so people have really kind of bent over backwards to do this, and I think it's a testament to how many people Stan has really touched, with his own kindness. So.
That's excellent. No, I had the pleasure of meeting him at WonderCon, 4 years ago. And Sergio Aragonis was with him and stuff. And yeah,
the other nicest guy in comics.
Yeah, exactly. The bookends. I'm with you. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. There are certain creators that I'm not ready to have a good conversation with because I just don't feel prepared. And Stan, unfortunately, falls in that category. And it's like I just don't want to half-ass it. So. And I am sorry that he is having as tough of a time as he is. I will do what I can to help promote this. And God, I'm really glad you mentioned not only Bill, but Randy as well. So as we get closer to the book, I'll be bugging those guys too. And certainly you'll be welcome back to talk about the book as well if it's, when it's ready, if you're interested.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, as I say, the plan is to have it out in time for San Diego. So,
hopefully,
to give it kind of maximum exposure, and then I'm not sure how long after that the art auction will happen, but
we'll figure it out. That's cool. That's amazing. That's really, really wonderful.
And it comes at sort of a propitious time too, because this year is the 30th anniversary of Usagi Yojimbo, so It all sort of somehow is tying together,
Wow. Crazy. I can't believe that either. Holy cow. Man.
Yeah.
Where does the time go? Unbelievable.
Yeah, you tell me, Don.
I know. No, I hear you, pal. Believe me, I respect that. I want to mention, I don't know if you were aware of this, but I keep wanting to talk about it because, as you say, with those underground comics things that you were doing and doing kind of the readings with, projecting the images and stuff, are you aware of what Art Spiegelman has been doing lately? And he's going to have an 8-city tour later this year?
Oh, I mean, I haven't seen it. I've only just heard about it. I would love to. I heard Art speak a couple years ago here in Portland, and he did his sort of, capsule history of comics as it relates to him, and it was, he's brilliant, he's wonderful. But his show is not coming to Portland.
Oh, because I wasn't sure if they announced the 8 cities. I know. I'm so sorry because, we were lucky in Chicago. We got, it's only been in Sydney, New York, and Chicago. And I got to see one of the performances at the University of Chicago, completely blown away. And luckily, Dean Haspiel, it's fantastic. It was amazing. It was incredible. And it's, God, I wish I had the list of the authors that he promoted, and people might have heard it on other episodes of Word Balloon, but for those of you who haven't, it's called Wordless, and he has a jazz sextet with him on stage that scored this amazing, various musical pieces for each separate story, and these stories are amazing. They're from the 1800s all the way through the 50s, and the subjects are very, very literate and, kind of Upton Sinclair kind of jungle material to, out-and-out farce and, one British creator, really funny piece. Art made a couple original pieces for the presentation as well. And Art just gives this great, background about each creator in these, silent graphic novels that were in some cases woodcut impressions. I mean, it's just fascinating, really amazing. And I know that they're publishing them, too, and I know he is curating the republishing of a lot of these books.
So these are new wordless graphic novels? I mean, or new in the sense of not been published before, so not Lynn Ward, not Franz Mazaril, for instance?
No, Lynn Ward and Franz Mazaril are in there and stuff, but I think maybe the original medium that they used was woodcut, as he described it. I mean, I really have to, But it was fantastic, and I'm so sorry it's not coming to Portland. That would seem to be like one of the obvious places to go.
I think it's a no-brainer, but no.
Well, hopefully it's successful enough that they go beyond the 8 cities that they're planning on doing. But I know it's going to be in the fall, and Dean Haspiel was great and put me in touch with Art. So hopefully, sometime late summer, early fall, I'll get him on.
Well, maybe all right. Maybe I just had read about the first 3 cities, and so maybe if they're doing another 8, maybe Portland will be on the list. That would be.
I hope so.
Wonderful.
I certainly hope so. Well, and it's my way of really wanting to get in with you about comics and literature, because I know that that's been something that you've been, passionate about, teaching it as well at Portland Community College and stuff. And
that's a whole other area that's really exploding, and that I've been getting a lot more involved in. I've been teaching a comic studies course since 2002. That's sort of the official name for the academic brand, I guess, is comic studies. Like film studies,
sure,
comic studies.
Why not?
And So my course is comics, art, and literature, and for 10 years it was basically, I kind of taught the quote-unquote canon. It was a historical survey course, taught kids the formal elements of comics, as well as read sort of some of the more important work in the medium. And looked at comics from every decade, from the 40s to present. So, but the last couple years, I've shaken things up a little bit, and I only teach 1 term per year because I have a full-time job.
Sure.
And so last year we did a focus on Frank Miller, just did an entire term of Frank's work.
Wow.
Taught by Frank's editor. So, but I was not able to convince Frank to come out to Portland as a surprise guest. I was hoping that would happen, but
Sure.
no luck. He was busy making Sin City, So, and upcoming this term, I'm going to be doing a focus on comic memoir.
Interesting.
So,
Wow.
we'll read people like Nicole Georges calling Dr. Laura. I'm looking forward to that. Nicole is a friend and a talented gal. Daughter of Her Father's Eyes, written by Mary Talbot and drawn by Brian Talbot.
Mm-hmm.
The Dreamer by Will Eisner, of course.
Figured there's to be some Will in there.
Students also get a taste of the 40s and, get a little sense of the history.
I saw the reissue of The Dreamer this past Wednesday. Yeah,
didn't you? I think you posted it.
I sure did. Oh, you're sweet for seeing that. Thank you. I'm so glad that you saw that, Diana, because, that is truly one of my favorite Eisner pieces. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's nice to use in a classroom because it does give students a sense of the history, too, which I feel is really important. It's good for them to understand where comics come from.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, more and more people are teaching comics across the country. At the University of Oregon in Eugene, which is just a couple hours south of Portland, you can now get a BA minor in comic studies.
Amazing.
That's largely the work of a young professor there named Ben Saunders.
Indeed.
Who's a comics fan and a PhD in English Lit, and he took those two interests and managed to navigate all the institutional bureaucracy to get this program through.
Understood.
Here in Portland,
in
Portland, we have a similar. Portland State University is working towards a comic certificate program, comic studies certificate program. And one of the local community colleges is also creating a comic studies track as part of their associate's degree. So
fantastic.
it's happening in a big way here in Portland, where people are studying comics, where it's sort of being recognized as a legitimate field of academic inquiry, but it's not just happening here in Portland. It's happening all over the country.
I have a friend, Christy Blanche, who is an instructor at Ball State University, and she's been doing those mass open online courses, MOOCs. Mm-hmm. And she has her second course coming up in just a couple weeks, in fact. And no, I like it, and we had that discussion a few weeks ago on Word Balloon about, it's great. It really is, and it's, like you say, you make the comparison to film study and stuff. It's wonderful that the art form is being recognized for what it is, and that it is an effective storytelling medium that shouldn't be ignored and should be celebrated and truly studied. Do you think that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that there are good, current examples that can get alongside The Dreamer and Mouse and Frank's Best Stuff and some of the other greats?
Yeah, but I mean, really, I think any comics are, the danger, of course, is that if you bring comics into the academy, that we will only look at the acceptable comics. The sort of, yeah.
So you serve pizza alongside. Yeah, you serve pizza alongside the steaks. It's okay. You're not ashamed to go. No. This is the junk food, but it's good junk food. It's all right.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. And in fact, because the first wave of comic book academics would only teach the kind of stuff that that they could sell to their departments. So, Mouse, Joe Sacco's work in comics
Absolutely.
journalism.
Big fan.
Alison Bechdel.
Yes.
The people who are sort of writing for an adult audience, writing and drawing for an adult audience, and tackling subject matter that is a little more complex. That's how comics got into the universities, because you needed that level of sophistication to convince the academics that this stuff was worth studying. Now that they're in there, we're having a little bit of a backlash, and some of the instructors who are teaching comics courses are saying, but hey, wait, I grew up reading superheroes, and there's lots to be said about superhero comics too, and there's lots to be said about commercial monthly comics. There's lots to look at and study, and so now it's becoming a little more Catholic, I guess, a little more universal in terms of what's being offered as a legitimate course of study. There are courses being offered in superhero comics, for instance. So,
well, and I know you've,
and as I say, I taught my course on Frank Miller last year, and we ranged from superhero comics to crime comics. To historical comics with 300, just looking at Frank's work. So
that's awesome. Well, and I know you've guest lectured for Brian's courses as well, writing courses and stuff.
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So do you come in an editorial capacity? What do you talk about when you guest lecture for those things?
A variety of things. I mean, Brian started teaching because I called him one day and said, will you please do this?
You're the one. That's fantastic. I didn't know that.
Because I'm involved in this stuff, and I had Brian come out and speak to my own students on occasion, but Portland State University contacted me. They, in their MSA writing program, they wanted to offer a comics writing course, and they had contacted me about it and asked me if I would teach it, and I explained to them, look, this is Portland, and there are actual comic book writers here, and not only are there actual comic book writers as opposed to editors here, but we have the number one most popular best-selling comic book writer there is living here, and that's Brian, and let me ask him if he'd be interested. And kind of much to my surprise, he immediately said yes. And so, off and away. And he's now teaching not for Portland State University, but for the University of Oregon as part of their, BA minor in comic studies program. But because they're located 2 hours south of here, he's now situated in sort of an adjunct building here in Portland, where he sits in a very tiny room, and he teaches a screen of students who are 2 hours away. It's the most surreal kind of experience. Anyway, yeah, I have guest lectured in Brian's classes in the past, in real classes, in real time with real students right there. But a few months ago, when I guest lectured to a screen of little teeny tiny pixelated heads, that was definitely the most surreal teaching experience I have ever endured. Yeah,
that's
very weird,
very Orwellian. I like it.
Yeah. Bizarre. I don't think I could do that. Brian is he's so good though. eminently adaptable, and plus he's smart when it comes to tech everything, and I'm really not.
Okay.
So, but yeah, a very bizarre sort of deal. Anyway, yeah, that's what he's doing. And when I go in there, sometimes I go in there as Diana Schutz, executive editor, Dark Horse Comics, and of course they all want to know how to break into comics. How can I get a job in comics? So that's the usual. That's what they usually want to know when I'm guesting, because they're in Brian's classes. They are learning how to write, and so obviously the next step for them is, well, how can I write professionally? So
sure.
Very often I'll go in and speak to them about that. But there's lots of other stuff. In the past, I've talked to students about things like contracts, what kinds of contracts you might expect to face when you're just starting out in comics. What options there are, the difference between work made for hire and creator ownership, for instance. There is so much for people to learn about comics and the comics industry. And Mike Richardson was just saying the other day, there's a crying need for courses for how to edit comics.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, I mean, you learn that stuff on the fly, on the job. There are quote unquote editing courses that are offered at various institutions, but to my knowledge, I have yet to see an editing comics course that takes into account the interplay between words and pictures, as opposed to just dealing with words.
Interesting. I understand. So you mean even things like balloon placement and things like that, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All the hands-on, all that kind of stuff. I think right now, mostly what's happening in the universities is something a little less job-oriented and a little more academic. But that's, there was a time when I really, I would get really pissed off that, like, for instance, many comics courses tend to be taught in English departments. Mm-hmm. And what that means is there are a lot of well-intentioned professors who love comics and who get up in front of their students and they talk about the stories. But imagine teaching a film studies class and never once talking about camera shots and only ever talking about the story.
Understand. Never
once bringing up where the camera is. That's not a film studies course. You know what I mean?
I do.
And similarly, if you're teaching comics, you have to talk about the visual components of what you're reading. That's not happening enough to suit me. And the reason for that is because many of the teachers who are teaching comics are not, say, in the position I'm in, where I'm also working professionally in the field. And they don't know enough about the visual components. So for the first few years, as I was meeting other people and seeing how they taught their courses and learning about other courses being offered, I was getting more and more discouraged about this until finally I realized, we're at the beginning stages here, and just getting comics into the curriculum is the first step and the important step. And eventually it will come. You know, if you build it, they will come. And so, yeah, as you know, these are really early days for comics in the universities, and as it begins to grow, people will they'll get smarter about what they're teaching. So.
Have universities or other teachers come to you? It sounded like you said you are examining what others are doing at other universities, but have people sought you out to kind of get your point of view?
Oh, sure.
Good.
Yeah, sure.
Because honestly, yeah, when I talked to Christy about it too, and I mentioned Ben at Eugene at the University of Oregon and stuff, and I said, yeah, did you have a chance to talk? And I know Christy and Brian, that was a great moment at San Diego last year. Mark Wade and Brian and John Romita were about to do a panel, but beforehand and stuff, Christy had a chance to talk to Brian, and they were talking shop, and they were talking academic shop, which was great. And I really was happy to be a fly on the wall and kind of watching them kind of exchange notes and stuff. I know you and Brian obviously talk, so you know.
And the nice thing, Brian is authoring a book.
Yes, indeed. I wanted to get to that, please.
Words for Pictures.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We talked about that.
Which is sort of a compilation or inspired by his own class lecture notes. And I've seen quite a bit of it, and again, there's a crying need for something like that too. So
thankfully, too, his background allows for him to really take into account art and making it the important component that it is, obviously, in telling the story.
Oh yeah.
And did you contribute to the book as well?
I did.
I kind of figured that's kind of where I was hoping to go. Yeah. So I don't want to spoil. We want people to buy the book, but yeah, what can you tell us about what you said?
I was mean. I was mean and
good.
Nasty. No, Brian asked me to contribute something about submissions, and and I just told the truth. Basically.
Excellent. Yes.
Talked a little about how to go about getting your work seen in ways that I think really increase your chances of being published, and that does not include following the submission guidelines that every single publisher posts. Because getting your work seen by simply mailing it into a publisher, that's like the last way your work is. Maybe 1 out of 1,000 of those cold submissions ever make it. And yet, on every publisher's website, that's what you read. Here's how to submit your work, and that's really, your chances of getting in that way are almost nil. So I wrote up something that's a little more reality based.
That's fantastic. In radio, I do the same thing when my friends that are teaching broadcasting courses, they ask me to speak to students. And no, everyone's, if you want to get into a tough business, you need reality. You don't need your mom's approval and honey, you're wonderful and someday it'll all happen for you. You really need the truth. So no, that's awesome. We need more truth speakers out there. I respect that. Absolutely. Oh man, very cool. Yeah. So, and are you teaching, or do you have an interest in maybe teaching an editorial kind of course to kind of, because as you say,
I'm not really sure. Maybe we'll see. Because it's something that I do every single day. I'm not sure it's what I want to teach. My teaching to me has been an outlet for me to explore sort of other interests that I have in comics, and that are a little more theoretical, a little more academic, a little less, day-to-day oriented, I guess. And so, yeah, it's like teaching comics writing courses too. Those often sort of, come my way, and really, I read enough bad script. I have to do that in my day job. Reading, because I read submissions, or I'll work with new kids, and certainly have, and so, that's work that I do in my day job, and I it's just not work that I really want to do with my teaching. I need to have something a little bit different.
I understand.
Teaching.
Okay.
Yeah.
In your capacity, you said that you really aren't versed in terms of where the geek girl movement is right now, but there is this, conversation. I don't know how prevalent it was when you broke into comics, and obviously you went from stores, and obviously, and was one of the stores you worked at with Mike, and is that how you ended up?
No.
Well, that's right. Shame on me. Kimiko, too.
No, I started out in Canada. I started in Vancouver in 1978 at a place called the Comic Shop, and from there went to Comics and Comics in Berkeley, which at the time was a 7-store chain. And I very quickly developed a quote-unquote store newsletter for the chain, which morphed into a 32-page bi-monthly magazine. And this is back in the pre-computer, pre-personal computer days. So,
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, so, everything, I typed up everything by hand, and I pasted up mechanicals.
Okay.
And so I learned about, I learned kind of traditional editing and production on the job, making that little magazine. So. And
then Kimiko after that, right?
Actually, Marvel after that.
Shame on me. For a week, I hear.
Brief,
1 week. What happened? 4
days.
What happened?
Day 5, I called in and said, I don't think I can do this.
And what was the job and what happened?
The job was assistant editor for Ann Nesenti in January of 1985.
Okay.
She was editing the X-Men. Her office was the hottest office at Marvel, and she was wonderful. And it was, I was completely naive and just,
overwhelmed? Or?
I was overwhelmed. I wasn't ready to work. I had this completely idealistic pie-in-the-sky idea about what it meant to work in comics, and all of a sudden I found myself working for a Midtown Manhattan corporation, and I was not ready for that at all.
Okay.
So, yeah. So Kimiko came after Marvel, and after Kimiko came Dark Horse.
Okay, excellent. Well, and in fact, your brief moment at Marvel kind of informs my question as well, because as I say, right now, a big conversation among the women fans are, we want more representation, not just in terms of the characters in the book, but certainly we want more women writers, we want more women artists, we want more women editors. And
so tell me about this. Tell me about this explosion, this cultural thing that's happening.
Well, I'll give you the idiot guy perspective. I'll do my best.
Okay.
And ladies, you see already I've put my foot in my mouth. Women listening, exactly. I didn't mean it in a pejorative way, but I hope I'm not misrepresenting. But I appreciate this because I do think. Both companies are the major two, DC and Marvel, are responding. Mm-hmm. For example, the new Ms. Marvel. You've got G. Willow.
Oh, isn't that awesome?
There you go.
Great comic. Yeah.
There you go. Absolutely, and certainly Kelly Sue's Captain Marvel and stuff. That's another fantastic one. But it's true. I mean, that's the thing. The name women creators. You kind of can still count on both hands, and really maybe even on one hand some cases. God, Gail Simone was carrying the torch for so long. Anne was Nesenti was doing it when she was writing, I remember, back in the 80s. But that's kind of the perspective that I'm curious.
Anne's writing again, but for DC now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, I do think that, certainly at conventions and online, I think women fans are being very vocal about we want better representation. And I do think that the publishers are listening. But as someone, that is inside and everything and at a company that, certainly is a very diverse company. And I think as far as subject matter and also talent, what you see and if is it just the perspective of, when you broke into breaking in now, and some of it you've already talked about in terms of submitting and things like that. But, I don't know. Is it a friendlier place for women to break in?
Yeah, no, it's much friendlier. And look, when I got seriously back into reading comics, which is when I was in university, in my 20s. I mean, I'd read them all my life, but in my 20s, I started getting really serious about reading comics. So this was the 1970s, and I started getting serious about collecting them, and I started learning about stuff that I had missed when I was a teenager, busy with boys and alcohol and drugs and having fun. And
you bet.
And anyway, so began to really develop this passion for comics. And at the time, the only place we could buy comics was in the secondhand bookstores, the early 70s, and you'd have to go in the back and ferret through boxes of comics.
I remember stores
and
like
they
that.
were selling them for, a nickel a piece or whatever. But in 1974 in Vancouver, British Columbia, where I was living and going to school, a store opened up called the Comic Shop, and I became one of their customers. And there were, the only women that were ever in that store were, the wives or girlfriends of the guys who were shopping. And then there was me.
Okay.
And then cut to the 80s, the early 80s, when I first started going to conventions. Again, very, very few women, wives or girlfriends, very few women there sort of their own accord. Trina Robbins, Kat Ironwood, me, and a couple Marvel editors, Joe Duffy and Senti, Louise Simonson.
Louise, absolutely.
Just very few women. And when I was at Kimiko, I'd be on these women in comics panels or whatever, and two things would happen on those panels. The first thing is, and they're kind of related, the first thing is that, you'd go down the line of women and everyone would be asked, well, how'd you get into comics? What sort of comics were you reading as a kid? And without fail, going down the line, every single woman would say, well, they'd read Archie comics, or they read Funny Animal comics as a kid, or, they read cartoony kinds of comics, basically. And then they'd get to me and be like, well, I read Supergirl and Superman and Superdog and all those Super Horse, all those Lois Lane, all those crazy whacked out 60s Mort Weisinger edited Superman family comics.
Yep.
But most girls of my generation did not read superhero comics. And because superhero comics were the main fodder of comics for so many decades, women didn't get, for whatever reason that women didn't read them, they didn't read them. And so very few women came into comics because of that. And and then that's connected to when I was at Kamiko, and we would get submissions, and people would say to me, "Well, why aren't you hiring more women?" You know, I gave Jill Thompson, I believe, her very first penciling job ever in 1987, I want to say, penciling a 3-issue Elementals spin-off series.
Yeah.
But why didn't I hire more women? Because no women were applying for the work. That's why. And why weren't they applying for the work? Why weren't they sending in submissions? Well, because most of them hadn't read the comics that were being published for all those years beforehand, which were superhero comics. And so they weren't interested. They weren't there. Everything changed in the 80s, and I think you can point to Love and Rockets as being the primary catalyst, followed by the explosion of manga.
Mm-hmm.
When the content of comics changed, more women started to get interested in comics as a medium. And then as more women got interested in comics generally, then this crazy thing happened. Women started to discover or rediscover superhero comics, and now have embraced superhero comics in a way that just was not happening 20 or 30 years ago, you know. So I think only now, you know, why do we not have more representation? Well, because it's only beginning to happen now.
Understood. Yep.
It's been this sort of long line. It's sure as shit a lot different than it was 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, you go to cons now, and it's full of women who are there who love comics.
You bet.
And so, yeah, I mean, comics is not the boys' club that it was all those years ago. That's for sure. And as we continue to grow, and as we continue to diversify and make, you know, provide the content that appeals to women, more of them will come in. More of them will pursue work in the field.
Did you ever? No, go ahead. I didn't want to. Forgive me if I stepped on you.
No, that's fine.
That's great. And I appreciate your perspective on it. At Dark Horse, do you think? Because a lot of times I do think, as you say, if they're not making the product for a given audience or whatever, you may not think of, you know, making opportunities available. You say yourself, obviously, giving Jill the chance at Kamiko years ago. But is there even just like a benign kind of accidental, bias of just, well, we hadn't thought of hiring a woman to do this, a woman writer. I mean, God, I remember like the excitement when Gail was given the opportunity to write Action Comics and really write Superman. And it's like, man, that was a big deal. Certainly when Louise was doing it in the 90s, she was one of the Superman writers. I mean, that's the thing. You would have these instances, and again, as you say, it is small steps, and it is going to take kind of probably this generational shift for it to be more, prevalent. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, at Dark Horse, are you getting tons of submissions from women? And I mean,
well, I don't. I no longer see the stack
sure.
of stuff that come in through the mail. I got to say, what I'm noticing more and more. I mean, I read an awful lot of women cartoonists.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not working in monthly commercial comics. They're working in graphic novels. People like Nicole Georges,
mm-hmm.
or I'm thinking of, what's her name, Marisa, I can't remember her last name. She did a book called Cancer Vixen, graphic novel called Cancer Vixen.
I will look that up as you're talking.
Another woman, somebody Copeland. These are people who haven't come in via commercial comics, so I'm not that familiar with them, and that's why I'm blanking on their names. But somebody Copeland who did a graphic novel called Good Riddance about her divorce. The women, Lily Carré, Gabrielle Bell, the women who are doing more memoir type stuff, Alison Bechdel, obviously. They're doing different work. I see Laurie Sandel, who did a great graphic novel called The Imposter's Daughter about her father, who was a compulsive liar, and had, a total con artist, had totally conned his own family. Uli Lust, who did Today is the Last Day of the Rest of Your Life, this big brick-like book about her experiences traveling as a 17-year-old, going off with a backpack and going to Italy without a penny. And, there's a lot of incredible stuff happening that's being written and drawn by female cartoonists. Linda Barry. They're just not, I'm just seeing more of that in the non-commercial or the non-monthly comics world.
Understood.
Women seem to be drawn. Leela Corman, who did a great graphic novel recently called Unterzach, and women seem to be drawn a little more towards the graphic novel market, and as opposed to the monthly comics.
I wonder if that is, by the way, Marissa Acocella Marchetto?
That's it. Yeah.
Or Acocella Marchetto, if I'm saying the name incorrectly, but Cancer Vixen, I found that on Amazon. Yeah. And I'm glad that you rattle off so many interesting creators. And I wonder,
Kate Beaton, Hark a Vagrant, there are a lot of women creators out there. Carla Speed McNeil doing Finder.
Absolutely. Huge fan. You bet.
Just not necessarily working in superhero comics, and I think that's because, again, for whatever reason, women weren't traditionally drawn to superhero comics. That is now changing, but it's only changing now.
Sure.
So I think as we continue, we'll see more women coming in to monthly commercial, i.e. superhero comics.
I understand. And that really leads to my last big essay question, and that is, as someone who has observed the comic market for as long as you have, it sounds like, you're optimistic about where things are going. Certainly, comic studies are being more respected, and we're making strides there. We're making strides to have a more diverse creator market as well. But yeah, any other thoughts of beyond what you've already expressed in terms of how things look coming up?
I'm having a great time reading. I think back to what was available to me to read when I got seriously interested in comics, and all that there was back then were superheroes.
Sure.
And don't get me wrong, I still have a fondness for my superheroes, but I've gotten older too, and I have other kinds of interests, and what a joy it is to me that comics have gotten older with me and that I can read other kinds of stories as well. There is so much, I hate to think of how much money I spend at that comic store every Wednesday. There is so much to choose from. There's such a wide variety of genres and kinds of stories and kinds of storytelling, kinds of artwork, not just the typical, not the Marvel or DC house style kind of thing. Mm-hmm. There's a tremendous variety of material that just was not available 30 years ago, and that to me is that to me is the most positive thing that's happening with comics, I guess, as it grows to tell more kinds of stories, as the medium, as the business encompasses more kinds of stories, that will only serve to bring in more people.
Agreed. Now, seriously, you have been awesome. This was where I hoped was the conversation was going to go. You exceeded expectations, and I'm not surprised because you're a thoughtful person and the kind of person that I'm always happy to have on the show and really express their thoughts. So thank you so much. And really, let's not make it another.
Very kind, John.
No.
Too kind.
Oh, stop. No, seriously. Hey, man. No. I know the people you work with. I know the stuff you do, and I've heard you talk, and you did it again. And so thank you for my listeners. And really, let's not make it 6 years. When one of these other books are ready to drop, if you want to help Pub, that's fine, because there are still a million directions we haven't gone into, and I'd love to have you back. So let's try and do something again this year if we could.
We need to talk about European comics because that's my big thing.
I understand. As you finish the Manara thing, quickly, are there other, we talked about Mila Manara, but really, are there any other books you want to mention?
Well, there's the next Black Sad on the way, which, Black Sad has been a tremendous success for Dark Horse, and we published, it's up to volume 5 in France, and we published the first 3 books as one single edition, collecting the first 3 volumes. Then last year, released Black Sad, A Silent Hell, which won Eisner and Harvey Award for Best International Material. Juanjo Guarnido won for Best Painter. The art is spectacular, and it's great story. If you're not familiar with it, it's about John Blacksad, who is a 1950s era cool detective, but he's a cat.
Yep.
Yep. So it draws on the tradition of funny animals, but it's painted in a very realistic, very lush watercolor style. Really beautiful work. So the next volume, which I was actually working on when you called, it's called Amarillo, and it will be out in October. We're going to debut it at New York Comic Con, and
outstanding.
And the artist Juanjo Guarnido will be coming over from Paris, and the writer Juan Diaz Canales will be coming from Madrid. So this is an odd kind of the scripts are written in Spanish, but it's published primarily for the French market. So I'm, as I sit here editing the English language edition, I'm looking at a Spanish script, but I'm also looking at the French published edition and kind of triangulating between those two, and working with Katie La Barbera, who translates the Spanish script, and working with all of that to come up with the English language edition. So, Black Sad is one of my favorites, and it's been selling like hotcakes, which is really good because that bodes well for bringing more European work.
You bet.
Into the U.S. And there's just in the same way that we're seeing such a variety of stuff available for people here. Similarly, France has so much to choose from. There is so much happening over there, And there has been so much happening over there that hasn't been translated. Some really spectacular, award-winning material. And it hasn't been translated for one reason or another. I think in large part because, it's tough. It's tough work to do.
Sure.
And anyway, Black Sad, I think, will open new sort of, will blaze a few trails for Dark Horse to bring over some more European material. And, in addition to being in that comic store every Wednesday, I'm also reading an awful lot of French comics. And that's kind of where my passion is right now. There's a fellow whose work I've been reading. His name is Gibera, and he's another painter. Draws in a beautiful, realistic, again, watercolor, beautiful, realistic style. And the stories of his I've read are set in World War II. Again, real world-based stories, real human drama. But gorgeous material. And why his work isn't published over here, I don't know, but I'm going to try to change that.
Awesome.
So
that's excellent. No, and it would be great to talk to you about Amarillo before it comes out. So maybe September would be a good time, and that will help promote the New York show and everything. No, and would love to get more into European comics. Like I said, that's a great sphere. There are a ton of other things we can talk about.
And you should talk to Juanjo too, because he, the artist of Black Sad, speaks perfect English.
Oh, wonderful.
So you wouldn't have any translation problems either.
Well, I'm sure your guys at Dark Horse, like Ob Driver and the rest, will hook me up, and I'm sure we can make something happen. If not at the show, before the show. Right. And I would love to do that. But yeah, absolutely. No, that's a good excuse for us to pick this up, because really you've been fantastic, and truly the wonderful thing is, because these are jumbo size episodes and stuff, but my listeners are awesome, and they really do. They hang on every word, so they will be thrilled with the directions we went into, the subjects we covered, and the amount of time that we spent. But I don't want to be an ass, and I don't want to wear out my welcome with you. So we'll wrap up for now. But yes, we will make a plan of talking again in about like 7 or 8 months, and reconvene if that's okay.
Sounds good, John.
Diana Schutz here on Word Balloon. It's going to be a busy week on Word Balloon. Thursday night, we're going to be talking to Dennis Culver, who is the new writer on Doom Patrol for DC. He and Chris Berman are going to debut their first issue at the end of March. But they got a lot of fun tricks in store for us, and we'll be talking to Dennis on Thursday night. Friday night, talking to Mike Norton and Rafer Roberts about their brand new series. And then Monday, it's Matthew Rosenberg rejoining us for Word Balloon and what he's been doing lately. And on Wednesday, it's time for another King Speech with Tom King. So all that coming up in the next few days here on Word Balloon to say goodbye to January and usher in February. How is it already February 2023 next week? That's insane. That's how fast time moves, though. I hope you enjoyed today's Word Balloon. I'll be back with more this week. Until next time, thanks a lot for listening. Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2023. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.